Las Vegas odds makers have made their selections regarding the Big 12 football season ahead. And where are the BYU Cougars coming off an 11-2 campaign? Let's just put it this way. They got some major disrespect, and the spot they should have is being occupied by that team up north.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Jake Hatch of Locked On Cougars joining the show. A little Locked On Baylor, Locked On Big 12 crossover. Wanted to talk, Jake, about some of these odds. this Big 12 championship odds that came out this week from Vegas are crazy dumb. Is that about what your first reaction was to this?
Well, my first reaction was, did I get transported back like a year ago this time? Because Utah? Well, okay, no offense, but how in the world is Utah a favorite to win the Big 12? Sorry, come on.
You can offend, brother. This is you are allowed to offend Utah. Yeah, that actually is the exact thought I had. I was thinking I was seeing something from January of 2024. Utah, even with Kansas State at plus 25,000 to win the national championship, by the way. That's not just to win the Big 12. Obviously, that would be implied as those top two teams. But those are the Big 12 teams most likely to win the national championship. Now, Kansas State, I was high on going into last year. I still like them going into this year, even though they underachieved a little bit in 2024. Not crazy. But Utah, can you, this state better than me and therefore that team a little bit better than me? We played them in September, so I don't remember as much. But what could they possibly be pointing to?
The fact that they have a really good defense and they're going to lock everybody down. But here's the thing. They had a really good defense. It was the number one defense in the Big 12 by most metrics, and they still finished 5-7, Cam. So
won them 2 Big 12 games.
They're bringing Jason Beck in, a former BYU Cougar himself, to run this offense. He's bringing his quarterback with him.
That's the truth.
Damn here. But okay, no offense, a kid from New Mexico, that's who's going to win the Big 12. I'm hard pressed to think that this person, whoever these odds makers were in Las Vegas, that they didn't take last year's odds, just copy and paste and send it out all of a sudden.
I mean, that's what it feels like. Yeah. And after that, you have some of the Arizona State gets back in there. Arizona State at plus 30,000, and then Baylor, Iowa State, and Kansas all on the same plane. Now, Iowa State won 10 games. They went to the Big 12 championship. They bring a lot of their skill guys back. Baylor's bringing a lot of skill guys back after winning 6 games in a row. Where is Kansas coming from? I like Jalen Daniels as much as the next guy, but they go 5-7 last year. It's actually a pretty big disappointment for a team that was supposed to be up in the running. And so that I'm not understanding. But what's crazy, if you haven't put the pieces together yet, once we get past Baylor, Iowa State, and the Kansas Jayhawks, only then do we find the BYU Cougars.
Hey, here's the thing. BYU thrived a year ago on being the underdog. I remember they were a nationally ranked team, Cam, that went to UCF and was a road dog down there in Orlando. I can tell you, BYU players and coaches, they were royally pissed off the fact that they were an underdog as a national ranked team against a middling Big 12 team in UCF a year ago. They will take this. This will live on their bulletin board for months, and they will take it to heart because BYU just went 11-2. They absolutely thrashed the vaunted Colorado Buffaloes, and to find themselves, and I know that they lost to Kansas, but the fact that they're behind Kansas in these Big 12 odds, BYU is not going to be happy about this. I can assure you of that.
I just don't get it. And you know this as well, but preseason rankings, they don't mean a ton. You take them with a grain of salt, right? But that said, when you look at any of the preseason rankings of any of the major outlets, it's the Big 12 teams are BYU, usually the first one listed. ESPN had them in the top 10. Yeah.
We have 90% of BYU's roster that went 11-2 this year is coming back next year, Cam.
It's BYU, Arizona State, and then your Kansas States and Iowa States and Baylor are kind of rounding out that either 19 to also receiving votes. Utah is not on any part of this. Kansas is not on any part of this. This is so, is it weirdly like a compliment of like, hey, the Big 12 just always throws us a wild card. So throw it at the dartboard. Utah should be the wild card this year.
Okay, Utah can be the wild card all you want, but they were like this big bad team that, remember, their fan base came in last year. We're going to run this league. We're only going to be here for a short time. We're going to the Big 10. We're going to the SEC. Rah, 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 rah. And they went 5-7. They fell flat on their face. Do they expect Cam Rising to emerge once again and lead them to glory? I don't think so, because his own head coach said he ain't coming back here to play. So I am baffled at this, but in a way, BYU should be thanking everybody, saying, all right, thank you for the chip on our shoulder, because guess what? We are going to use that, and we're going to go out there and stick it to everybody once again next year.
Now, this is an important part of it, right? Because honestly, without the UTs and the OUs in the world anymore, like nobody in this conference really handles prosperity like year in, year out. No one is the alpha, I guess is the term. And obviously UT did not handle it very well the last decade and a half they were in here. But like other than Oklahoma in the late 2010s, like nobody was just like, all right, we won it this year. And guess what? We're going to win it again. Yeah. And we're going to win it again and again and again. And so all these teams can kind of lay claim to, we like being the underdog. BYU, obviously, you guys saw it this year. I think back to Baylor's most successful season of recent memory in 2021. Nobody was ranking them before the season. Nobody was giving them any odds.
We just watched a team go from literally worst to first in terms of preseason polls. Arizona State was picked 16th out of 16 teams and won the darn league and went to the college football playoff. This is a topsy-turvy league, and I think it's going to take some time for that proverbial alpha to emerge from the pack, if it ever does, quite honestly, because it may not ultimately do that. But you're right. Your point, I think, is well taken, that Vegas is planning on this being a league that is just going to be volatile, and that's what they're betting on. But Utah, Kansas State as your favorites, it feels like they just took last year's odds and said, hey, let's see if we can sneak this by everybody once again.
That could be the case. Like, I've not ruled that out. That really could be the case. So as we look at these odds then, where would you have BYU? Because I think Baylor and BYU are two teams that very well could be in Arlington in December. So where would you put them on the grand scale of things here?
I would actually have both of them in like the top four. If I had a top four, I would say it's Arizona State, it's BYU, it's Baylor, and then I would actually include also Kansas State in that mix, because I do like what Kansas State returns. Avery Johnson, another year of experience under his belt. Chris Kleiman is shown to be a very capable coach. That would be my top four in this league. And there'd be some other teams on the periphery right there. I think Texas Tech, just by virtue of what they've done on the recruiting trail this offseason. I'd have Utah maybe mid-table, but I think that both Baylor and BYU should have aspirations of being a team that can make a run at Arlington next year and playing at AT&T Stadium, because these are two teams, two of the hottest teams down the stretch of the season. BYU started 9-0. Obviously, BYU and Baylor played an absolute classic down there in Waco. The BYU was lucky to hold on for the victory there, but that really kind of jump-started what Baylor did in the back half of the season. So I look at both the Bears and the Cougars as teams that are saying, no, you may think we're not favorites. No, we absolutely are going to be favorites, and we should be favorites to go to Arlington.
Take that, Vegas. You just sit there and watch Baylor and BYU Arlington Big 12 championship. Book it.
Baptists versus the Mormons. Let's go. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, and endless possibilities. And there's a better place to make every play more exciting than with the FanDuel Sportsbook, my friends. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling who the MVP will be, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. The best part is, with live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle as well. The live betting feature allows you to stay involved no matter what is happening on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing you can bet just $5 and potentially win up to $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. So take advantage of it today, my friends. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com to get started today. Bet with FanDuel, an official partner of Super Bowl 59.
Here with Jake Hatch, locked on BYU, crossing things over ahead of a big basketball game here on this Tuesday night. The Bears traveling to Provo. Not a great spot for them last year. This was one last year at the Marriott Center where Baylor was actually playing well going into that game. And it was like, hey, if they can go and beat a BYU team in an atmosphere like that, the sky's the limit. Well, they didn't. They did not. And the limit was the second round, which was further than BYU. If I might add, we're going to look at these two teams. But first, I need to go kind of talking heads. Before we look at the two teams, let's look at the two stars. And it's Yegor Demin. I almost said Denham again there. And I've watched the kid play all the time. I almost said Denham again. And VJ Edgecombe. They both come in as guys who were lottery picks before the season. Very highly touted freshmen. Both international guys, but through some different routes there. And you look at the numbers, and I would say both these guys, it feels like haven't played their best basketball yet. Maybe at least just from a pure statistical standpoint. VJ's starting to come around. We'll talk about him in a second. But first, Jake, I want your assessment, your full honest assessment of Demon so far.
Honestly, it's incomplete because he missed a full month due to a knee contusion that knocked him out for the month of December. He finally came back at the start of Big 12 play. And quite honestly, Cam, he's been in a slump shooting wise until this past game. BYU needs him to be a threat from the perimeter. And obviously his NBA aspirations, they are contingent on him being able to actually be a shooter, because we all know that the NBA, it values shooting above all else. Everything that Yegor Demin has in his tool belt is NBA quality. His court vision, his size, his ability to set his teammates up both in the break and in the half court. He's got all of that. But the biggest thing is, can he shoot consistently? And finally, this past game, it finally came out. He started getting back to what he was doing early on in the season. And if that continues, kind of what we mentioned about VJ Edgecombe, where he's starting to come into his own, we could see the back half of this Big 12 slate be the Yegor Demin show, because BYU needs him to be at his best if they want to make the tournament.
This could be where it starts. This really could, because I don't know, quite frankly, if Baylor has a guy that can guard him. They don't have that athletic wing that's kind of a good, both ways, two-way guy that they've had so much in years past, whether it be Matthew Byer or Jalen Bridges was that guy last year. I think Jalen Celestine does some good things for them, but we haven't seen them, honestly, we haven't really seen them play a wing this good, first off, and this talented, I should say, maybe not quite put it all together yet. And then from there, you got Jason Asamoto, I think is a promising freshman who could get out there and guard him just size-wise. But this could be like a good launching pad for Demin in terms of the matchups he's going to see in this game tonight. Because with him, I see a little Chet Holmgren there. I actually see a little bit of unpolished Jason Tatum there. I don't know how crazy that sounds to you. I watched Tatum play, obviously, almost all of his games in the pros as a Celtics fan, but I watched him play a lot in college, and he was more polished at that point than Demin is now. With him and Holmgren, I just see, obviously, that length that you can't teach, but the smoothness of that game. Like when he's cooking, it's really tough to stay in front of him.
His ability to turn the corner and get to the rim, he can get to his spots whenever he wants, but the biggest thing for him is he doesn't have the body of a Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum is a thick, and this is when he even played in college. He had the body that would allow him to hang with anybody who wanted to get physical with him. That's kind of the one thing that Yegor is still dealing with, is the fact that people want to get physical with him. He gets knocked off his spot a little bit. But when he decides to put his head down, he has proven his ability to get to the rim, to get to the spots he wants to get to on the court. You want to see more of that. You want to see him assert himself and become the player that could be a top 10, top 5 NBA draft pick. And this is a stretch starting with this game against Baylor, Cam, of 8 of their next 9 games for BYU are quad 1 games. So if they want to make hay and essentially put their resume together for the NCAA tournament, this next month and a half, roughly, it's where they're going to have to prove it. And if a guy like Demin can really emerge, become the force that BYU needs him to be, that's going to give him a major opportunity to punch their ticket to March Madness. But he has got to be the guy. I hate to say it, but he is the key to BYU's success or failure this season, it looks like.
And to kind of go off the point of, how his offensive game is, it's tough for guys coming from anywhere at that age to really be assertive when we get to Big 12 play and we've got teams mucking it up there. Sure. And especially coming off an injury that kept him out a month. Do you think you're starting to see the strides in that part of his game, come to fruition a little bit?
I think so. Now, it's one game sample size. They played Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's a bottom tier team, it looks like, in the Big 12. But he shot the three ball confidently in that game, unlike what we had seen for many of the games before that. It looked very unconfident when he would step up to shoot one of those threes. So the one thing I'm looking forward to is seeing, okay, is what he did against Cincinnati replicable against Baylor? Scott Drew, he's got a very, very good team and a very cohesive unit, especially on defense.
Okay.
I'm interested to see what they do to defend him, because the other thing is BYU is going to have a guy who's also had aspirations of being an NBA draft pick in Cannon Catchings, who's another potential one-and-doner. They may focus on a guy like Jaeger Demon to slow him down. Well, that opens the door for a guy like Cannon Catchings to step up. So this is a game. Everything I understand, Cam, in talking with BYU Sports Information Department, is there are dozens of NBA personnel that are going to be at this game. Well, you got 3 potential first-round picks in Jaeger Demon. We'll talk about VJ Edgecombe in a minute, and also Cannon Catchings in this game. You're going to have a lot of people showing up to watch these guys and see how they compete, because to your point, Jaeger has got the size, the athleticism, and the court vision to really hurt Baylor. But I am interested to see how they counter that, because what I've seen from VJ, I've watched plenty of him play this year, is he is a guy that when he decides to take over a game, he very well can do it. The problem is he's been too passive at times, and that's kind of the same issue we've seen with Jaeger Demon at points.
You absolutely nailed it, and you took my transition right away, because I was going to say, no, this is good, because it's like if you're looking for something of what, how Jaeger Demon can turn a corner here, look no further than VJ Edgecombe. I know they're not the same player. They're both freakish athletes, but not the same player. And we were saying that, as early, as recently as a week and a half ago, of like, is this as good as VJ gets in college? You know what I mean? And by no means has he been a bad player or a negative or anything like that. But you're just like, man, underwhelming. Puts at the highlight reel dunks and then does a lot of little things well, but he's supposed to be a top 5 pick. He's supposed to be a superstar. And we're starting to see that a little bit. Yeah.
So can I ask a question though? Because I look at his minutes totals, 35, 34, 38, 41. Are they redlining him already at Baylor? Are they playing him too much? Is he hitting a proverbial wall in your mind? Maybe is that slowing him down a little bit?
That is an interesting question that I've only thought about the last day or two, because I think they did do it with Utah legend Keontae George.
Yes.
I think they did do that a little bit, and because he was their only point guard. I'm not so sure. I honestly think it was a confidence play from Scott Drew of like, hey, whether it takes you 2 games or 2 months, you are going to be a focal point of this team. We're not going to kind of baby you to it. So that doesn't mean that they haven't put him through too much yet. That doesn't necessarily mean that, but I think that's what the play was. And honestly, you talk about a guy playing with confidence, and it's finally come through about the last week. And I honestly, this might be, propping him up too much, but just knowing VJ and like that personality and what everyone talks about, he was probably too much of a team guy to start, if that is such a thing, of like, I'm going to defer to these guys because they're the leaders on the team. Where in reality, it's like, VJ, you are the best basketball player on this team. And we've got some other good ones, but you could take over a game here.
He's averaged 25.5 points the last 2 games. So it sure feels like he has emerged from, as you mentioned, kind of that shell that he was in. And if that's going to continue, we could see 2 guys, if they truly have turned the corner, both Jaeger Demon and VJ Edgecombe, we could see a classic match between these 2 to see which of these 2 guys is the best. And the fun part is, for both Baylor and BYU fans, you could be looking at 2 guys you could be watching for years to come in the NBA starting in April.
This is what Provo, Utah brings you. This is what Big 12 basketball brings you. Yeah. We've talked about the phenoms. Now let's talk through the teams. Who is going to win this game tonight at the Marriott Center? Let's break that down next.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Intuit TurboTax. This is a message from them. Taxes are waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. It seems like it happens every single year. And then, of course, you're waiting and worrying and wondering some more when they're actually going to get done. Now, taxes, when you match with a TurboTax expert, they will do your taxes as soon as today. And the expert will give you your taxes, their undivided attention as they work on your return while getting you real-time updates on their progress so you can just focus on your day and go about your other activities. An expert who will find you every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy, all so you can get the most money back guaranteed, my friends. No waiting, no wondering, no worries at all. Now, this is taxes done right. Get an expert now at turbotax.com. Available only with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates are only available in the iOS mobile app, and you can see guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. But once again, get started today with our friends over at TurboTax.
Big one tonight, Jake. I mean, obviously we talk about the type of dandies, baby, that are playing in this one, but more importantly, these two teams, man, these guys need a win. They need a win like the one that's being presented to them in this game tonight. So before we get into kind of the breakdown, I have to just interview question ask you, what is BYU's best win this season?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say the best win is actually the most recent one against Cincinnati. I know that Cincinnati is not probably the best team that BYU has played this season, far from it, quite honestly. But BYU struggled through a really, really tough first half against West Miller's squad, and Cincinnati likes to really grind in their games. They had 10
last year, yeah,
they had 10 offensive rebounds in the first half, and BYU was just kind of like, okay, kind of sleepwalking through this. Let's see what they got in the second half. Then they come out. Cam, they shot at 62% from three in the second half of that game, out-rebounded Cincinnati, limited them on the boards, really just locked down Cincinnati on defense. And that second half of the game against Cincinnati showed me, okay, when BYU decides to really lock in, and yes, they're shooting it well, this is a team that can compete with anybody in this league. The question now is, can they replicate that and make it a full 40 minutes? That's kind of the big question here. And Baylor's the first opportunity to do that because, as I mentioned, this kicks off the toughest stretch of the season for BYU basketball. And if they want to make the NCAA tournament, they've got to be 500 at worst in the league come the end of the year. They're 4-4 right now. So over the next 8 or 9, can you split those games, go 4-4? And a game at home against Baylor, it's got to, in my mind, be a must win for BYU.
Because you look at Baylor and they're in a similar situation. I mean, St. John's is the best win of the year, which the Johnnies have been playing good basketball recently that I had to eat my words about a little bit. And so you have two teams similar in the record column. BYU obviously a game under in terms of the Big 12 record, but these guys need some signature wins here to get into the tournament. And I don't want to say these opportunities don't come up all the time, but you're looking at a team at Baylor. If you're on BYU side, you'll get a team at Baylor that has not lived up to expectations this year. They're shorthanded in a sense. You know, Jeremy Roach probably not going to play tonight in the concussion protocol, up in altitude, probably not going to play. And you're playing them at home. And you've got Demon back. You know, you're kind of working them back into this thing. It's certainly a huge opportunity for BYU, as it is for Baylor to, you know, get a big time win on the road in the conference, because you know just as well as I do, with that quad one schedule that you guys have coming up, this could, you know, BYU could win 4 out of 6 here after this. And then they're in the rankings. That becomes a very impressive win.
And that's got to be the hope for a BYU squad. And I know Baylor's here's the thing. BYU fans, I think, have been a little underwhelmed by Kevin Young and what he's accomplished so far, simply due to the fact that Kevin Young came in and has made BYU this recruiting powerhouse they've literally never been. They just signed the number 1 recruit in the 2025 recruiting cycle.
Yeah.
With AJ DeBonsa. Obviously, when you do that, and when they get Jaeger Demon here, Cannon Catchings, some of the guys they brought in this past recruiting class, and then looking forward, BYU fans are saying, we got to be better ton 500 in the Big 12. But I think that the thing is, this is a first-time head coach in Kevin Young. He's trying to get his whole thing implemented. He has one of his best players in Jaeger Demon missed an entire month. Dallin Hall, one of their other better players, one of their veterans, missed the first part of the season due to a toe injury. So it's been a makeshift lineup for long stretches of the season for BYU. And now finally, over the past 3 to 4 games, Cam, The full lineup has finally been available for Kevin Young to mess around with, and we're finally starting to see some of the rotations settle in here for BYU. From my perspective, you talk about Baylor, they're still a little shorthanded, and so BYU has got to be thinking, okay, no Roach, Baylor's coming in here a little undermanned where we were a couple of weeks ago. We got to take advantage of this opportunity and win this game. But Scott Drew has proven time and time again as a head coach, and he's one of my favorite coaches in this league because he does it the right way, in my opinion. He goes out there and his teams put on a very steady Eddie performance. That's the best way I can describe what Baylor does. And if VJ Edgecombe, if what he's doing over the past 2 games against Kansas State and Utah, if that's legitimately what VJ Edgecombe is capable of doing, BYU better watch out because he could pour it in Provo.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And I do have to admit, I didn't do it last year when he was in the league, but I love Mark Pope's offense, man. I really do and did.
Well, and that's
go ahead.
Well, that's the thing about this is if you liked Mark Pope's offense where it was chuck a bunch of threes, Kevin Young has brought an NBA offense to the game.
Yes.
He said it in his press conference earlier this week, actually yesterday, that BYU I don't know if they're still there, but his analytics say that BYU was the number 1 team in both shots at the rim and from 3-point arc. They don't take mid-range shots. It's just not what BYU's offense is built around. They want to play a full NBA style offense, and they're implementing it. And the last 2 games against Colorado and Cincinnati, they've executed it to a really, really high level. Now, those are bottom tier teams in this Big 12 right now. Can you do it against one of the better teams? Much like you, speaking of Baylor, kind of middle of the pack right now. If you can replicate that against Baylor, that shows that BYU may very well finally be turning that corner, and Cougar fans may finally start to buy in once again, because I think a bunch of them have jumped ship at different points this season.
I'll ask you this in kind of a broader general picture here. You talked about Kevin Young and his recruiting acumen, and maybe some help from the local 5 up the street in Salt Lake. But hey, that's the game, man. Like that's how the game is played. So let me ask you this. I'm sure you've used this term and have heard this term when it relates to BYU basketball. With those things in place, NBA offense, NBA coach, and a whole lot of money coming in there, and back-to-back years of Demon and then AJ DeBonsa, Brockton's finest. Is BYU a sleeping giant?
They're hoping to be. Here's the deal. Kevin Young has made it very clear that he plans on making BYU an NBA factory. But the byproduct of that, I think from the Cougar fan perspective, is great. Bring in those one-and-done guys. Make them NBA stars. Get them off to the NBA. But you better win along the way here. That's one thing. BYU fans, they are a super, super loyal fan base, and they expect their teams to win. They love when guys like AJ DeBonsa talk about wanting to be at BYU. They love the fact that Jaeger Demon has bought into his time in Provo and is enjoying what he's doing. But they want the byproduct of all that to be winning basketball games. So if Kevin Young can ultimately go out there and win at a decently high level, I think year 1 BYU fans making the NCAA tournament, that'd be just fine. But then only goes up from there, because when AJ DeBonsa shows up next year, you're talking about a team that's going to have expectations of Sweet 16, Elite 8. BYU's never been to a Final Four, Cam. They have the moniker of being the team that's appeared the most in the NCAA tournament without a Final Four appearance. It's like 35 or 36 appearances without making the Final Four. That's going to eventually be the expectation for Kevin Young if he continues to recruit at this level. But BYU, they're in it. They're paying an NIL. They're competing for the best talent out there in the college basketball circuit. So yeah, with that comes massive expectations. But Kevin Young, he has been very clear that he's not shying away from those expectations himself.
I used to work for a summer league baseball team, Cape Cod Baseball League. Okay. And this team, they did win the championship when I was there, but they had their glory years a few years before, like 20 years before. And they said, yeah, we won a lot, but we didn't put anybody in the MLB. I was like, why do you guys care? Yeah. You know what I mean? And now they do. They put a bunch of guys in the pros, but it's like, you got to win, man. That's awesome. Like, I don't care if Baylor doesn't produce another NBA guy ever if it means they win national championships. Don't
exactly. That's the thing about this is BYU's put together a very NBA style coaching staff. You look Will Voigt and the different guys who are on Kevin Young's staff. They've all got professional backgrounds, and they operate this as a kind of an NBA team. Each coach has 2 or 3 players that they work with individually to make sure that they're operating operating at peak efficiency. And Kevin Young is just kind of this mastermind who his whole goal is to get guys to the professional level and give them that opportunity to chase their dreams. But once again, you've got to go out there and win, because if you're just producing NBA talent, but you're a middling Big 12 team, Cougar fans are kind of like, okay, great. What have you done for us lately? And so that you're right. That's a very good point. You want to see winning as a byproduct of this talent coming through these programs.
One last thing, real quick. I won't put you on the hot seat for prediction, but I do want what your X factor has to be in this game. What has to happen, and if this thing happens, BYU's going to win.
BYU's got to win the rebounding battle. Now, Baylor is a team that they will come in and try and control the tempo of this game. That's just kind of a Scott Drew staple of how his teams operate. But BYU's got to control the action. They got to control the boards in this game. I look at that Cincinnati game. The first half, BYU struggled mightily on the boards. Kevin Young said they went in at halftime, and all they talked about was rebounding in the halftime chat. They came out, and they rebounded just absolutely outside their minds. It's been a very good rebounding team for BYU, generating extra possessions. You got to have Keba Keita and Fousseyni Traore, as undersized as they are at times. They have got to win the rebounding battle. And if BYU can generate those extra possessions at home, that'll give them a major opportunity to win. You have an X factor on your side.
Yeah, rebounding is a big one. I guess I'll have to knock that off. Honestly, I think VJ needs to continue being the guy he's been the last two games versus kind of the breadth of the season. But I think more importantly for Baylor is going to be Rob Wright. Jeremy Roach not going to play in this game. That's just the Cam Stewart prediction. He's not going to play in this game. And Rob Wright has been pretty solid, although he's been kind of more loose with the basketball the last two games. And he did play considerable minutes in stores when they played UConn, but this is like hey, we've got a big opportunity to win a game here on the table. He didn't start that game at UConn. Roach got hurt, getting a separate injury in that game. You're starting. This is a big time environment, Big 12 road game. Need him to be huge for Baylor. That's it for me.
It should be a fun environment. It should be sold out at the Marriott Center. So I'm looking forward to it, Cam. It should be an elite one. And if any Baylor fans are making the trip, enjoy your Cougar tail on me. All right.
Yes. I've got to get the Cougar tail, man. I went in 2022 and didn't get the Cougar tail. Anyway, Jay Catch, Locked On Cougars, one of the very best shows we have in this entire network, not just the Big 12. I'm Cam Stewart from Locked On Baylor. Oh, Jake, it's going to be a fun one